as a business, like the vision for us is move, right? So we will offer any logistics and mobility services with a vision of moving India.
Hey everyone, this is Chirag Joshi. Welcome to episode 28 of The Driven Show. Today's episode is a special one because it's in collaboration with Rapido Labs, a unit within the mobility company Rapido that takes care of engineering, product, data science, and they've taken it upon themselves to have the conversation around mobility to be made public and have as many people be part of that conversation, similar to what I do. So of course it was a very natural integration between me and them. And here we are. I'm sitting down with Mr. Pramod N, who's the head of data science and engineering at Rapido. And today we're going to have a conversation around the theme of how every city in India is driven differently. Because as Pramod is the head of data science, he's at the receiving end of so much incredible mobility data from all around the country. And he can really tell how each city is different from the other in terms of mobility. So super thrilled to have someone like him on the channel and have this collaboration with Rapido. And let's dive right in. Pramod, thank you so much for being a part of the show. And I know how swamped with the work you might be, and you took out this time on a Sunday. So thank you so much for being here. I think I'd like to start off with something pretty basic. If you could just give I'd say 60-second intro about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll take it off from there.
It might not require 60 seconds. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully we'll be able to share something that we've been looking at and learning on the fly every day.
Mm-hmm.
So to begin with, I am Pramod. I come from a machine learning and distributed systems background. I've been doing in this space for the past 10 years through academia as well as in industry. I used to work at a consulting firm called ThoughtWorks before, where I used to lead their data practice for ThoughtWorks India.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm at Rapido and I head data science and engineering for Rapido.
Great.
That's briefly me.
Sounds good. I mean, if I have to just elaborate on ThoughtWorks, as far as I've heard about ThoughtWorks, I think it's like this holy grail of developers. It's just the place to be. And if you say you're from ThoughtWorks, yeah, right off the bat, you're the guy people want. Is that true?
Well,
is that reputation true?
I think we try to be. So it's definitely a place for good developers and people who aspire to get good software engineering sort of skills and who want to solve challenging problems. Definitely a place to be.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I've heard a bunch. I've just started my professional career and I've already heard about it, so pretty sure it's pretty good. So cool. With that, I just wanted to sort of track it back before we get into the whole Rapido things and the conversation around that. As this channel is known for, I'd like to learn a little more about your love for data and tech and how did that start off?
I would say I'm one of those late bloomers. Well, I never really had access to computers up until probably 2006-7.
Wow.
And I think 2006 started 11th, and that's when I got into programming and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was instant love of some sort, where programming was fascinating. Everything around programming was fascinating, and then it just hit off from there.
Mm-hmm.
I think data really started probably in 2010 when I think my professor he just called a bunch of us and said, "Look, this is something that we're trying to solve. Can you guys sit and solve this?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably the first machine learning problems that we ever picked up or solved.
Mm-hmm.
While back then we didn't really have, it was fun and learning and so on. While we didn't anticipate what it could do, at least some of us, machine learning as a thing grew and some of us are still pursuing some form of a career in data and machine learning. So that I think it is more opportunity meets the right attitude per se, rather than I wanted to do something in data. Well,
Okay.
quite ignorant and didn't really know.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's honest. That's pretty good. But I'm glad that happened, and you could really sort of find. I mean, it was an instant love, and I think it was really true love because it's been more than a decade, I guess, doing this. So you're really at it. That's great.
Yeah.
In terms of your professional career is now, it's fair to say it's 8 years, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 8 years, and the field is of course around data and tech and machine learning, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yep.
So what's been the biggest learning in this whole sort of your professional career till date? One learning that, I mean, you can call it from a people standpoint or from a sort of data and tech standpoint. What's been that one thing that's just priceless for you?
This might be a controversial one, but I think everyone says they want to be data driven. Nobody likes when data says something. Right? This is true across the board. I think I've worked with a lot of clients who love to be data driven, and they've hired us, solve a data problem, etc. But at the end of the day, when data says something and it does not agree with their thought process or preconceived misconceptions, then people tend to sort of not care about such principles. So I think the biggest learning for me is being data driven partly is about data. It's more about having the right attitude and being driven. While you can be driven, without data per se, I think data just gives you that right direction and right place to be and so on. That is how I would probably think about like one of the biggest learnings that I constantly take everywhere and probably lead with is you need to have that. I mean, it's not okay to just say you want to be data driven. You actually have to have that metrics thinking, blah blah blah.
Okay. So that means I mean, it's like staring yourself in the mirror. Like you might not like it, but it's the reality.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? So,
okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. But I've also heard this other sort of not argument, but a point of view about data is that data is what you make out of it, or like what you want to see, you see through data. Is that at all true? Or what's your take on it?
So I think one of the British politicians a while ago said lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I think there have been a number of satirical movies, TV shows just built on this, right? So I think there is some element of truth. So interpretability of both results, outcomes, and the raw data itself is a big part of what you get out of data.
Yeah.
And I think it's partially true that you can technically see what you want. Right. So, I mean, while it might not be correct, while it might not be the whole truth, it's definitely part of some truth. Right. And I think the trick in becoming or getting somewhere with data is also that, like, how do you get to the whole truth, if not the whole, at least the majority of the truth. Right. And that's critical for if anyone is aspiring to become an analyst or a data scientist or whatever else. Like one of the things that you need to have is that eye on, is this just an anomaly, simple correlation, or is it actually the cause, or is this the entirety of the truth, if I were to call it so. So I think it is partially true. Like you can do it. That's what differentiates good and bad. So I might sound a bit philosophical. There isn't good and bad, whatever, but it's just the good doing and the bad doing, not really the ultimate good and bad.
Got it. No, that makes sense. I mean, that's what I like to do. There's this divide between if you're a tech person, you're just all about sort of numbers and all of this, and you're not much of a human, or at least that's how people perceive it. And if you're a sort of more artsy person, you don't understand data and tech. So I mean, I think there's a synergy in both, and I think one helps the other grow. I mean, at the end of the day, all the technology does or takes advantage of and makes our life convenient is by really taking advantage of how we are as humans, right? I mean, like, if not for all of what does data actually give it? It tells at macro how do human beings react to a particular thing, right? I mean, like, that's how you perceive things. That's how I mean, it gives it in numbers because that's how you can make it quantifiable, and then you can take actions on it. But I always think there's a good synergy between, at least that's how I come at technology and data. That makes it sane for me, at least. But that's how I view it. So I want to understand, you spent a very good time at ThoughtWorks, and I think if I sort of skimmed through your LinkedIn, I saw, you were there for good 7-8 years. So, and of course, as we've already discussed with the reputation of ThoughtWorks, such an amazing place to be. What prompted the shift from some place like ThoughtWorks into a mobility startup like Rapido? How did that happen? And why did that happen?
Again, this is yet another one of those accidents, I suppose. So I think for me, there were many triggers. I think a lot of people go through this journey in a different way, and then this is probably just my journey. Maybe it's very naive, I don't know. So for me, I think the triggers were back in 2016, where okay, I've been building all these models, whatever, I've been building this software, whatever, what do I do with this? So then I think it was about getting people, like I had a vision and a point of view on how people should do this and how people should get value out of data, etc. So I think that journey started in 2016, where I actively started going out, both when I was in the UK as well as in India, to sort of take people on that journey. Like, look, this is what it should be because it has these X, Y, and Z benefits, and this is what it could be. These are the possibilities. But in order to get there, you need to choose this path. That was sort of the narrative with which we led a lot of our conversations and offerings. Now, I think at that point, one thing that came out was it was almost like a hit and a miss. It used to work some places, in some client situations and so on. And in some places, it was a miserable failure. Like, people can't be bothered listening to something intellectual and very heavy to understand and grapple with, whatever. So I think back in last year 2019, I think I was at a state where I think I've had this 50-50 hit and miss going on. Should I continue and gather more of these examples, or should I do something else? And something else meant, instead of telling people what to do, I would rather just show it how to do end to end. Right? So I think that thought was lingering in multiple sort of places, and I think casually I'd heard a few friends back in London as well as in India reaching out and saying, look, these are the interesting things that are going on, etc. One of such interesting conversations was with our head of engineering, Kata, who's a very good friend of mine. And so he was kicked about, so I think he had just joined Rapido, and he was kicked about the prospect of what was happening at Rapido and the growth and so on and so forth. And the selling point for me was the metrics-driven culture that was already there. Because I think one of my biggest struggle was just to get people to think metrics. I mean, sure, we can build whatever you want us to build, but at the end of the day, if you can't measure it, what's the point? Right? I think that used to be often the conversation, whereas here, at least the way Kata sold it was, there is metrics culture. Like, you don't have to worry about that. You can just come and do what you want to do. So I think that accident happened, and post that, another 4 months of back and forth, and then eventually Rapido happened.
That's great. Awesome. Sounds good. I mean, but do I see, or do I sense a sense of purpose that led you to sort of get on to Rapido, where instead of just convincing other people to do something, as you said, you wanted to do the whole thing and then tell them. I mean, then in your head or in your heart, it becomes, see, I told you it could be possible. Was that kind of like the thought process?
I think definitely was there. And I think we've written a lot of people could appreciate it, but at the same time, it was expensive for them to sort of change, because it involves like a lot of organizations changing, etc. Whereas here, there was an opportunity to pick up something that was already just in a sensible place, like metrics thinking and culture in operations, etc. And build on top of that, and then enable people to get better metrics, better outcomes because of the metrics and so on. And it was almost like a blank slate. Like, okay, you go to what is right.
So
I think that was definitely a selling point. I think there were a few other offers and conversations, but this was probably the biggest selling point for picking Rapido.
So when you say metrics driven culture in Rapido as an organization, so what exactly do you mean by that? So I mean, for someone who doesn't understand that, what does metric driven mean, and why is it that most other organizations, or why is it that a company like Rapido is an anomaly in that case, where they're really metrics driven?
Right. So I think just to give you a few nuggets, perhaps my first conversation with Arvind was on the back of, look, we are trying to hit this outcome number and working our way backwards. We think, there is a lot of optimizations to be done, and, data has a lot of role to play, etc., etc. The conversation started with, this is the number, right? So that itself was an indicator. Okay, while there is clarity of what needs to be done, at the same time there is a target as well.
Yeah,
I think similar thing happened with Pawan in one of our first conversations. His biggest problem was I think something about demand or something, but I can't recollect fully, but it was almost always, okay, this is the number.
Yeah.
And when I came in as well, I think the most of our conversation always had, okay, how do I measure it? Like it was very voluntarily put forward. Whereas in my experience, in places where I've seen this done in really large companies, metrics is probably something that a lot of people don't care, right? I mean, it does not mean that they don't look at numbers. It's just that they look at numbers in a certain place and time, and it's not part of the fabric of every conversation or whatever.
Okay.
So I think in Rapido, one of the good things that is going on, and I think the founders have done a good job at that, is there is everyone in the operations team and otherwise, there is a semblance of, okay, if I have to make a change, I need to be able to substantiate that with some number.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, which is the best, etc., is debatable. But at the same time, the fact that you are able to do it and have that mindset, it's a big win for someone who wants to do something with data.
Okay.
So I think that way I would say it was slightly different from other people. Can't comment on other people, given I don't know.
No, makes sense. But yeah, I think I like that because as you said, I mean, not there just isn't a clarity of direction, but also or sort of not an end state, but a state that you want to reach at this point in time, right? So that of course it's quantifiable, and you can of course work backwards from it. And of course, when you want to make some change, as you mentioned, it makes a lot more sense if you can sort of measure what it would take to make that change and what impact would that change have, at least in quantifiable terms. So of course it's always easier to make those decisions. So that's great to hear, that metrics. I mean, we're building a company, we're in the early days of building a company, so hopefully we can learn something there. So thanks for that. So before we jump into the meat of the matter, I want to ask a couple of more questions. Number one is, what, I mean, I know you've said, your role at Rapido, but if you just want to explain a little more, what does the head of data science and engineering do at Rapido really? So if you could just, talk about that for a bit.
So I think one of the biggest parts of the job is to set direction from how do you get value from data, right? So come up with the strategy of, should we solve this problem versus that, or should we solve all of them? Whatever these are, whether it is different levers that we have access to, price, incentive, different marketplace levers, etc. Or whether it is providing clarity to teams as to why are they doing what they're doing, why are they going the way they're, to the place where they're going, and what is the actual impact of, whatever they're contributing, etc. So this is more around, how do you set strategy, how do you set goals, how do you, build that direction in the company per se, just from a data point of view, like what value will you get from data. The second part of the thing is you solve problems on a day-to-day basis. You solve problems, right? So these problems might be as simple as this pipeline is broken because the data is not coming, or shape of the data is different, or whatever, to something as big as this city, our rights are going down, right? So how do we recover from that, and so on. So it involves a lot of collaboration with different business teams, internal teams within data, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at a high level, I would say the role is all about setting direction and providing clarity
Mm-hmm.
as to how and what you should strive as a team, which will contribute to some data outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you as the head of the data science department, your department is responsible for collecting data not just of your product, which is outside in the hands of millions or hundreds of thousands of people, but also internally in the organization as well. Like you also take track of the operations process, the HR process. I mean, I'm sure there are a bunch of organizational processes as well. So is that also the kind of data that you guys crunch and analyze and then give your inputs on?
So it's majority, again, if you do it value driven, we would look at any data that has highest value outcome per se, right? So currently in the state where we are in, given the situation outside and even before that, given the growth, etc., I think there is more value in us looking at how do we provide better services and how do we provide uh, uh, you know uh, faster, reliable, and more earnings friendly kind of a marketplace. I think if we spend more time there is more value to be had. So at least that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
While we capture some of the operations related data on the ground, what is happening, even some of the external factors like weather or whatever else. While we do that, I think mostly our focus is on making the marketplace more responsive. And whatever levers we can push to make the marketplace more responsive, that is at least going to have contribution from data.
Okay, sounds good. So now we're gonna get into sort of what we really want to speak and what I'm super excited to learn about. But before that, we're gonna just set context. So if you have to explain what and who is Rapido, what would you say?
So we are the largest bike sharing and a taxi company in India. So I think before lockdown, we were the largest taxi company with rides anywhere between 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs rides a day, kind of, right, ballpark. And I think back to pre-COVID, I think we had taxi, and we used to do some amount of delivery to to different businesses, as in businesses used to hire us to for their delivery operations and stuff. I think post-COVID we are a slightly more, shall we say, energized offering where we now have a courier product which people can use to send, local couriers.
Like a Dunzo model. Is it like a Dunzo model?
I'd say it's a Rapido model, but sure. Yeah, it is. It is. So it's called local Rapido local. If you've not used it, it's a very simple, customer to customer courier kind of a thing.
Yeah.
There is now another product on, just running errands. Like you can buy this, that, and this from stores.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a buy from store product. I think there's also maybe this is too early to announce, but you should look forward to some of the services on auto. I think we've started in Hyderabad.
Auto rickshaw?
Yeah.
What? Wow.
Yeah. And hopefully we want to see if we can expand that to a lot of other cities as well.
So is it ride hailing? It's like Ola Auto, Uber Auto, Rapido Auto. It's like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. That's nice. So I'm guessing. I think one of the things that I think, considering the whole delivery landscape which is shot through the roof because of COVID, I think even in your business, have you, of course, you've seen the whole shift from B2C, which is bike taxi, into more of a delivery focused sort of revenue generating thing for you guys. As you just highlighted the products, I'm sensing your B2B has now sort of taken the larger share of the pie than the B2C, right? Or is it not?
Probably not. So I think as a business, like the vision for us is move, right? So we will offer any logistics and mobility services with a vision of moving India, right? And I think this is a common conversations. I'm sure even Arvind will talk about this. I think there are probably 300 million commutes that happen in India, and there is not a single player who captures all the 300 million, right? So even if so our goal is to become the reliable transportation mechanism for commute, which will capture most of the India's needs, or large part of the India's needs. So with that kind of a goal, while we want to move not just people, we also want to move goods. But I think currently there was a bit of change in share of rides, etc. But it's back. Like I think currently, taxi is back as our biggest market share. Okay. But some of the delivery stuff is not too far behind.
That's interesting. I mean, I was considering, because with the concerns around safety, and I mean, bike taxis right there, they're right behind each other. So I mean, just understand what are the steps that Rapido has taken to sort of have that hygiene layer between the pilot and the customer. Have you made sure and made consumers sort of not so paranoid of taking a bike taxi?
Right. So I think one of the things that you have to understand is some people don't have a choice, but they have to travel. Right. Now our goal is to make sure that their travel is as safe as possible, while it is cost effective. So what that means is, you don't have to get into a bus or a metro or whatever else. In the open air, the propensity of the virus spread, etc., is low. But at the same time, we want to ensure whoever is flying are safe themselves. Like, for example, one of the things that we ask our captains to do is constantly check temperature whenever possible, wherever possible. Because I think given they're moving all the time, even checking temperature is hard, right? So it just gets, if you're in the sun, it varies and so on and so forth, right? So the other thing that we like, mask is on, it's a must. We might soon roll out something to sort of try and see if we can get better compliance. So the third thing that we are now experimenting with is a shield, which allows like a layer between the rider and the customer. This is experimental. We're trying to test it out in a few places and see if it is comfortable. Does that work? Are customers willing to sort of use it, and so on and so forth. More importantly, are captains okay with it? So that is something that is getting tried. Arogya Setu is sort of mandatory for all captains. Like they have to install Arogya Setu as one of the apps. And I think there are also some of these hand sanitizers wherever possible. See, I think the challenge with bike is unlike an auto or a taxi. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's hard to carry. If it gets over, what do? You have to go buy. Some of that is just it's an operational challenge. While we're trying to solve for some of these, I think at least currently what we're making sure is at least some of the basic etiquettes. Everyone should be following that and so on. Right. So I think that's what is the current state. I think in the near future there is a lot of focus on solving for safety. Whether it is corona or otherwise, right? So we definitely want to solve for safety, and hopefully we'll have something to show which is probably more innovative and first time in India.
Got it. That's great. So talking about data, one metric I'd like you to give us and the audience is, how many bikes are on your platform currently?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that. But I think I can definitely talk about ballpark number of captains who are on the platform, right? I think at any given point in time, actively, if this was in March, you would have seen probably 3 to 6 lakhs. It varies. Bikes on a daily basis. Having said that, I think there are a lot of factors that come into showing how many people are there on the platform.
Of course.
And again, definition of active and so on and so forth, right? So I think now the numbers are slightly lower because the need for movement is slightly lower. But I would say, at any given point, you can assume somewhere between 3 to 6.
Got it. Nice. Good range. Very good. So tell me how and why is every city in India driven differently or moves differently?
So maybe let's talk about this with an example.
We'll get into the examples. I have a very interesting sort of way in which we can
Okay, sure.
deconstruct your experience. But answer this question for me first.
Okay, so I think every city is different because fundamentally city is a living and breathing thing, right? It's primarily because of the people in it and their needs, right? Like Bangalore is an IT city, whereas Jamshedpur is not, right? Mumbai is a multifaceted but only more driven by financial services and so on. Hyderabad is again there is a tech part of the city, there is a logistics part of the city, and stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think every city in that sense is different because of its different need to move,
Mm-hmm.
and because it has different needs for movement, it also behaves differently. Like the way it behaves to price, or the way it behaves to availability, or the time it wakes up, or the time it goes to sleep. All of this is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So added to that, I think even geography, weather, like is it winter, summer, is it raining, not raining, like everything matters, especially when you're exposed to all elements because of the bike taxi, right? So I think every city has a story to tell for sure, especially in a diverse country like India, right? It's never the same.
I mean, we have, even in the same state, at every 100 kilometers, languages change, traditions change. I'm pretty sure mobility changes too. That's a good mix there, and that's a perfect segue into what I want to focus on. Now I know you're at the receiving end of, I don't know, petabytes of data, I'm sure, of mobility coming in from the Rapido systems, right? So I want you to sort of tell us stories of these different cities that Rapido operates in sort of a different geographical bifurcation. So it's going to be north, south, east, west. I want you to take one from each of these regions. I want you to take one mega city and one sort of tier 2 city, or upcoming city, or whatever you want to call it, and tell us stories about how they're driven differently even in the same region, which is north, and then sort of similarly for all regions. So let's get started. Pick your direction first.
Let's start with Bangalore. It's easy, given we are in Bangalore. So I think most of this is on the basis of what we've observed from a demand, etc. point of view. And I think this is also because of the way the city is designed and what happens in the city and so on.
Yeah.
Right. Now, one of the things about Bangalore is there is IT for sure, but what people don't realize is there is a very specific pattern in Bangalore, just from a mobility point of view. So maybe one of the ways of framing this is Bangalore has a tech boulevard, where a boulevard is trees on both sides, etc. Whereas I think in Bangalore it's slightly different. You have tech parks on both sides. Like you have a huge outer ring road and tech parks on both sides. Yeah. So like the road between Sarjapur road on the one side to, let's say, Tiarupuram on the other, you have 4, 5, 6 kilometers of like it's almost sprawl of tech parks, right?
Yeah.
Now, what this does is it puts interesting challenges on how people move, right? So you will see a lot of patterns and anti-patterns of what people ask for, what do they do, and how do they move, and so on. And in some cases, it's fairly funny, and in some cases it's not so funny. Like if you take some of the tech villages on the outer ring road, they are, I think if you have to deliver something or pick up someone, you have to go at least a kilometer inside, and then you have to circle around, go through all that security, whatever, and then come back, right? So what that has led to is there are some microcosm of need where people want you to fetch something from outside the tech park and then come and give it back to you.
Oh wow!
right? Like, so this is part of the courier thing, whatever, where get me some chai from Chai Point or whatever else if they're not able to deliver. Such kinds of needs sort of crop up, which is fairly spontaneous, and it because the service is there and because of the way it is designed, some of these things happen. The other flip side to this is if, let's say, you're a captain, let's say you are near Sajapur Road signal, and you get an order, let's say you have to go to, I don't know, Embassy Tech Village or something like that, somewhere close by, perhaps maybe Adarsh Palm Retreats or something. You have to navigate the traffic, and it's just one road, right? There are only very few crossings and underpasses and so on, like flyovers and so on. So you have to navigate all of that and then get to the entrance, but after that you have to go like a kilometer, etc. Right? So you start seeing different patterns of how both your captains and customers behave.
Yeah.
So you'll see captains sort of lining up near tech parks instead of other places, or sometimes even under the flyover, right? Yeah. Because it's at a junction, you can go everywhere. But I think the point is, it shapes both sides of the mobility piece because of the way the city is designed, right? And you will see this pattern flyover after the flyover, right?
Okay.
You'll see this everywhere. So while Paris has Champs-Élysées, I think Bangalore has the Sarjapur Road to Kiarpuram Tech Boulevard. Maybe we should just rename that.
Tech Boulevard, yeah. Forget Outer Ring Road. Yeah, that's nice.
So I think that's the story of Bangalore. So what happens is you will see a lot of these. This is just one part of Bangalore, right? So you'll see similar things,
of course,
going on in PTM layout when one of the earliest rising parts of Bangalore, people start taking rides in 7 a.m. in the morning and so on. And I think the similar thing happens in the north, near Majestic and stuff like that. So I think what you will start seeing is, when you start looking at this data, you will start seeing the way a city sort of rises, and then the way a city behaves, and where does the city move, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that once you have the data of mobility of people, the individual or a group of people, it's fair to say that you kind of have an idea of how they live their lives, technically, right? Because so much of human lives depends on how we move, where we go, what we get, what we don't get, all of that. So you start. As you said, one of the earliest rising sort of group is the BTM layout thing. That gives you an idea of the kind of people that live there, the kind of jobs they must have done. So is it fair to say that in your experience that you might have some idea of how people live their lives?
I would say we will have some idea of how people move, for sure. I think we'll tend to be less intrusive about what we collect, so we naturally don't know what people do. But I think based on how they move, we can make an educated guess. Probably they're going to a tech park, or probably they're going to some restaurant or whatever else, right?
Of course.
So I think there are a few things that can benefit from looking at this data, for sure. Like, just both from a consumer of mobility service, as well as a city just managing its mobility needs, right? I think there's immense benefit in looking at data.
Got it. Take me through another smaller city in the southern region of India, and talk to me about a story that's interesting from your point of view that you've seen as part of Rapido that's significantly different, of course, than how Bangalore moves.
I think in the south, where are we? We are in probably Coimbatore, Vizag, Vijayawada. Maybe we could talk about one of the things about Vijayawada. Vijayawada is an interesting city. A lot of mobility stuff happens in Vijayawada. Like, even it probably has, I'm not sure if this is Vizag or Vijayawada. I think one of them probably has the biggest second-hand impound lot.
Biggest second-hand, sorry, what?
Impound lot, like it has the second-hand two-wheeler impound of some sort.
Okay.
commercial, not not police or etc., but commercial lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of other funny nuggets like this you will see in that city, and that also is sometimes visible in the preference from a customer need point of view, right? So Vizag and Vijayawada is probably unlikely cities where you will see a lot of mobility, whether it is in bike taxi or otherwise. But you will see a lot of mobility because of that cultural alignment, ease of access, lack of public transport, and so on and so forth. Right. So I think Vijayawada is one of such cities where they've open arms embraced bike taxi in a lot of places. I think the other thing is wherever you see rivers, you'll see a lot of funny behaviors both from customers and captain. I think Vijayawada is one of such cities where wherever there is, if your order is coming from one side of the river and you have to go to the other side to pick up, almost always there is resistance.
Okay.
So we do a bunch of things to sort of make sure that doesn't happen, and it is localized and so on and so forth. But sometimes during demand crunch, it does happen.
Yeah.
And you will start seeing desirability from a city point of view. If I'm on this side of the river, I want to be on this side. If I'm on that side, or when people are trying to go home, especially when there is a river, they will not touch a order from this side. They would always want to go.
Because
get an order
that's
from the other.
Home's that side.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. Right. So I think you'll start seeing some funny behaviors like that.
That's interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about let's go to east. So in the east side, which are the pick one big city, pick one small city, and talk to me about some interesting things that are different there.
The east, I think let's talk about maybe Guwahati. Slightly smaller, it's not that big.
Yeah.
It's one of such cities which has a desire to move and has embraced bike taxi per se. And I think there's also a lot of YouTube content from Guwahati.
Content creators. That's a good point. I think I've seen that as well.
And I think they like their bike taxi and the experience and the sharing of the experience and so on. I think I've seen a few interesting content things coming from Guwahati. I think someone on a Benelli or some Ducati or some such superbike registered with Rapido.
What?
And
wow.
That was probably one hell of a Rapido ride, right?
Of course.
So I think that happened in Guwahati. I think that city in general likes bikes, and you see a lot of young crowd enthusiasts who have registered both as part-time and full-time sort of captains. Apart from that, I've not observed a lot from just as a story of Guwahati a lot, but it's definitely a city that moves on bikes. Right? If you were to go to bigger cities, Kolkata is weird. I say weird. I mean, I'm sure people in Kolkata are very nice. Love the sweets, but it's just as a behavior, it's quite interesting. Where at least from a Rapido point of view, it is one of the cities which wakes up late.
Okay.
I don't know if they move late. I don't know if
choose your words carefully here.
Yeah. I don't know if they move late. I don't know if they really wake up late, or are they just relaxed with all the goodness of Kolkata. But it's something that happens, right? So so I think typically you will see like a morning peak and an evening peak in most of the cities, right? In Bangalore, that is a very common sight.
Yeah.
Right. But I think Kolkata has a laid back 11 o'clock peak.
Oh, okay. 11 o'clock.
I again don't know why that happens. And then we'd be making an educated guess. We could talk to a bunch of people and figure out, but I'm sure there's something in that city which makes it that, right? And then that's quite interesting.
People might just love each other, they want to spend some time with family. They don't want to rush to office there. Who knows?
Which is great, like fantastic. Maybe just everyone in Kolkata should go to all the cities, right? So that's
absolutely. Yes, you're saying the other one.
Yeah, so I think the other funny thing about Kolkata is it's also one of those Bangalore is circular, right?
Yes.
So we have a inner ring road, outer ring road,
Yeah.
peripheral, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kolkata is not like that. So Kolkata is more like Bombay. It's slightly more vertical, and I think
Yeah.
it has that bridge, and
Mhm.
then you go on the other side and sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So often you will see one-way movements.
Okay.
Don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe because whenever they are in a rush, they take a more convenient transport, and then whenever
It's a
they're
relaxed
not, I mean, they will probably take.
car. Oh.
Yeah, don't know,
That's interesting.
right? But I think the interesting thing is the city, like majority of the city behaves like that. Again, this is also part of that interpretation. Like,
Yeah.
we probably shouldn't conclude that the city is like that. It's just that it is a behavior that you observe, right? So it's quite interesting to see like these unidirectional movements and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the peculiar thing about Kolkata is the laid back 11 o'clock peak.
So is it fair to say that are they the most sort of, their peak is the most sort of late amongst the rest of India, or are there some more laid back cities in India?
I think you will see laid back cities in India. I think in metros, I would say they are probably the most laid back, just from a bike taxi point of view, perhaps.
Got it.
But I think there are other cities where you will have a 1 o'clock peak.
What?
Yeah.
Who are these guys? I'm pretty sure it's not Mumbai, because it's scorching heat and all of that stuff. Definitely not the west side. Is it the west side?
It's typically, so you will see this in student cities.
Kota.
Let's
go to that. Let's go to that city. Yes. Talk to me about that.
So Kota is interesting. Kota, I think students who've studied for IIT, etc., will relate to this. But
hundreds of dreams have been realized, and millions of dreams have been shattered
squashed.
In that city.
Right.
That's the city.
It's a city that is probably cursed by these many millions of. I'm sure they revere the city. It is a fair place. So I think Kota is interesting because it's one of those cities which has a highest number of rides on a Sunday, right? And it has highest number of rides on a Sunday, like morning to afternoon, right? Which is, why would you take rides on a Sunday morning to afternoon?
Yeah.
I think
students gotta write their exam, they gotta crack the IITs, gotta hustle.
Yeah, so I think this is a hustle coming from these tutorials where most of the people wake up and then take bike taxis to go to these tutorials. Right? So it's also a very tight and compact city, just 2 or 3 kilometers of city center or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's quite convenient for bikes to sort of fly.
Yeah, and I think, of course, all of us in India have a cousin who studied in Kota, or you might yourself would have studied in Kota. But I had a cousin, and I think, or how much ever I've sort of, learned about Kota, I think that's a place that's two-wheeler dominated, because it's such a small city, and the students, of course, you can't afford cars there, right? So I think two-wheeler from a form factor point, I think two-wheelers dominate that city, right? And that's one of the reasons it was pretty easy to embrace that. Now that people or kids didn't really have to have their own bikes, they could just hop onto someone else's and reach. And I'm pretty sure the fares are convenient, and whatever, 10, 15, 20 bucks. That's a super convenient way of moving around in small cities. That's what I think. Rapido, correct me if I'm wrong, does Rapido make more sense, economical sense in smaller Indian cities? Because prior to that, they would have taken their own vehicles, or there isn't just a dominant form of mobility. And Ola Uber wouldn't make sense, right? Even in a Kota. So has Rapido as a bike taxi concept nailed that need for mobility in smaller cities in India?
I would say yes and no. I think it's sort of twofold. So one is, bike taxis make a lot of sense when you're traveling short distances. And when you're traveling in dense and packed areas on demand, right? It does not matter which city, it's true across the board. So, so I think anywhere this kind of a need exists, they've embraced bike taxis. Now, if you ask me, tier 2, tier 3 cities, is this true? Absolutely. Simply because I think the mode of transportation is well placed in solving the gaps that exist because of, let's say, public corridors or whatever else.
Yeah.
Right. You can't have a metro everywhere, so buses need to be there. If buses are not there, then you fall back to something like this.
Yeah.
So I think the tier 2, tier 3 cities, this is a genuine trend for sure. So I think one of the things that we used to track is the number of cities that we are in. I think back in March we had hit nearly 90 cities in India. I think almost 100 at some point.
Yeah.
And then we had to we were doing intermittent rides in some of the cities, etc.
Yeah.
And that is primarily in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, right? So I think there is a lot of relevance for doing infrastructure-less,
of course,
taxi systems in tier 2, tier 3.
Yeah, I'm sure, absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine, because I have a significant part of my family living in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and I go there. I mean, there's no metro, there's no bus. I mean, you have your own vehicles, and of course, 2-wheelers, 4-wheelers, a mix of both, right? And all of a sudden, a public transportation system is for the first time introduced, apart from auto rickshaws, of course, right? And I'm sure, I mean, it's such a convenient way of moving around. It's such a quick way of moving around, So I'm pretty sure, people embrace that fact as well. So that's great, that bike taxi as a concept could really solve a ready need in tier 2 cities in India. Coming back to the western part of India, you picked a smaller city, which is Kota. Pick a bigger city of your choice that has an interesting thing to say.
I think north and west is a bit worse, I would say.
Yeah.
So Kota has that morning thing going on.
Yeah.
And I think Delhi has an interesting story to tell. Simply because of the different parts of Delhi.
Yeah.
So I think this is a unique problem to Delhi or whichever union territory that sits on the border of two states.
Yeah.
Right. So you would have people who live in Noida doing rides in Gurgaon and the central Delhi, New Delhi, or somewhere in the north, Faridabad, Ghaziabad, whatever, east, whatever, and doing rides down south and so on. So there is a genuine movement of people which happens across the board, right? And Noida sort of leads the way. Like Noida is again one of those cities which has I think now the metro is coming up, and I think there are a few things going on there. But I think there's a lot of movement in and out of Noida, and there are very few things that sort of service that movement. If I were to call it so, and just to the nearby places, right? It's not like Noida, you have to go to Gurgaon or whatever. So I think even there, bike taxi sort of fits the bill. Even as a metro feeder, sort of bike taxi sort of fits the bill, and then you will start seeing these funny ride patterns just taking you to the metro station. Right? And that is something that is unique to any city that has metro. I think it's more prominent in Delhi, where it is to and from metro, and I think that kind of if you draw a metro line and then you draw rides happening, it would look like veins.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
And I think that's more evident in the NCR region than any other place. It's also evident in Bangalore. It's just that Bangalore, the
Bangalore
spread
sucks. Please.
I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say that, but sure. I think it's not as effective as other cities as yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only place it's relevant is that whole Yashwantpur belt. That whole green line is the one that makes sense. This purple line is just for taking pictures. That's all. It's nothing else. It serves no need. I see hardly any people because I've traveled on both those belts. My God, I mean, I can genuinely see the shift. So when you get to that Majestic and you get off the purple line to the green line, my God, there's an army of people into that whole Pina side, because these are daily wage workers. These are sort of hard earning workers who the metro really serves well, and I mean that's who it really should be for. So completely makes sense. But yeah, of course, Delhi metro, amazing. Love the connectivity these guys have. I mean, you don't need anything and you can still survive, in that city, and you can move around, and of course at less cost. So that Delhi metro right up there, Bangalore metro lower on the scoreboard. So that's how it goes.
Sure.
I'm allowed to criticize the city. I've been brought up here. No problem there. So I wanted you to highlight two more cities and two more interesting stories, but slightly on the wilder extreme. Like which is the most wildest place that you've seen people embrace Rapido? It could either be geographically wild, like somewhere up north. I don't know, Shimla, if you guys are there, or it could be just culturally wild. Or, I don't know, pick your definition of wild. But give me two cities that you never imagined Rapido could be there and it's thriving.
I mean, thriving or not,
But it exists at least, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the thing that fascinated me was when we saw rides in Tirupati.
Okay.
Which was for me, okay, this is a hilltop city,
Yeah.
and it's a tourist city, and people there, it's a very small, tight, core, right? Like you walk around, and even there are rides happening, etc., which was very fascinating. And I think some of them happen even up and down.
Yeah.
So at least personally, like for me, it was quite fascinating. Okay, Tirupati, there's rides happening. That is one thing for sure. I think the bizarre, I would say, plenty of these bizarre things going on, right? So Kota was bizarre, right? Like, why would you take a ride on a Sunday morning, right? So that was quite interesting to see. And I think even BTM is interesting to see.
BTM.
At least for me, what fascinates me with the entire BTM area is people have they've hugged Rapido in a sense, right? Like, which is fascinating to see.
Okay.
I think at some point we were struggling to sort of match the demand needs in BTM, and we had to put solutions in place to just solve that problem from a supply point of view or whatever. And I think the primary cause for that is Silk Board.
Okay.
If you have to cross Silk Board, you need rocket ship. Or
that's Bangalore's river that nobody wants to go to. You wanna sort of stay this side of Silk Board or that side? Don't wanna cross it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that. So there are many of these divisions that happen, and I think it exists in almost every city, like railway lines, highways, signals like that, and so on. And I think there's one like that in Gurgaon, where one side, like there's a highway that passes through the entire Gurgaon tech area.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it acts like a river where people want to stay in one side and demand from one side and supply from the other. It becomes hard, etc. Similar thing happens with the Silk Board junction. I think that's, at least for me, some of those were fairly interesting, because where are these people coming from? I mean, which is great. It's fascinating to see like so many people embracing something that is not so culturally aligned from an India point of view. Where we've all grown up either in a bus or a rickshaw or a horse, tanga, if you're familiar with that, or even cycle rickshaw, right? Like,
cycle rickshaw.
So I think as a culture, we've embraced those more than sit behind me, which is it's a new experience. I mean,
of course,
it's slightly more. It takes getting used to, and you have to look for being comfortable in that situation and so on and so forth. And some cities embracing that is just fascinating.
Absolutely. That's great. One last thing that popped up in my head, and from a data point, is from this. I mean, what percentage of Rapido consumers are males versus females? Because in my bias, or as much as I think it's going to be more males than female, of course. But I want to see the ratio by which it's different.
I don't remember this off the top of my head. It is definitely more males. But I think there are a few, when I say few, like there's a certain percentage of people who definitely vouch for Rapido, and this is a female population, right?
Okay.
So they find this service liberating, because it has given them freedom from crowded buses or haggling with autos. or even paying exorbitant cab fees, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is there for sure. I mean, I don't want to just give a random number, but I don't definitely I don't
No,
remember
makes
the
sense.
ratio as yet. I would
Yeah.
imagine it being anything between 70-30 to 60-40.
Yeah.
60-40 is the best case. I don't think it is 60-40 though.
Any stories around? I mean, I don't know if you have the data for it, but anyway, I mean, you're the data guy head. I mean, you should have all of this. But any particular city region where the female population is or that takes rapid ride is significantly higher than the national average of sorts. Anything there?
Not any of our cities as yet. So
Okay.
I think what we are seeing is there is a trend of increase in adoption across the board. At least we don't have a story where one city is more female than male. I don't think that's there as yet.
Yeah, of course. But I think just from a safety standpoint, I think taking a bike taxi makes so much more sense because of course there's so much. I mean, of course there's less people. There's just one bike guy. I mean, if he's not concentrating on riding a bike, I mean they're gonna fall, right? So safety standpoint, I mean he's vulnerable, not the lady per se, because she can just hit him on the head in case there's anything wrong, right? And I think also because from the structure of a bike, it's not enclosed. Because in enclosed sort of taxis and even auto rickshaws for that matter, it's much more of a sort of getting into someone else's safe and you're sort of confined by that. But bike taxi pretty much open, you can jump off the second you feel something's going wrong, right? So I think even from those standpoints, bike taxis seem to be, in my opinion, much more safer from a safety standpoint. Would you agree to that?
I think it is definitely one way to look at it. I think while the app also sort of tries to make it safer with ability to track, and you can share it with another person. There's SOS and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think there's an active community of captains who also care about such issues, right?
Really?
So,
Okay.
which I think as a system, it is sort of working out right now. And I think there are, like I said, I've seen female customers who have been a massive voice on the social media and so on for Rapido. Either with their stories of how it has helped and changed the way they move and the freedom that they've gotten and so on and so forth. So I see a general trend in adoption given some of these benefits.
Yeah.
And we hope to keep it that way. I think we want to make this more safer across the board, not just from COVID, etc. In general, we want this to be more reliable, more safer way of traveling than any other form. I mean, no disrespect to any other form. It's just that we want to generally make this more safer.
Of course. No, I agree to that. I mean, safety as an issue for too long has been sort of neglected from the field of mobility. I mean, at least in the Indian context, and I think right now with this new way of mobility that's happening, in all forms, from petrol to electric, from sort of ownership of mobility to shared mobility, I think safety, at least for me, and I think a lot of companies, is a big central piece around which their whole service is being designed, and hopefully will continue to be designed. I think safety is a big theme in mobility for me and a lot of the others that are working in the industry. So that's great to hear. One last question before we jump to the final one is, what percentage again? What percentage of captains do you have as female captains? Who ride bikes and do the service? Like, is that a sizable chunk there?
I think it's fairly small. Most of them are male, like 98-99% male kind of. But there is and again, this is with respect to like 6-7 lakhs people, right? But there is a certain small population which has embraced being a captain. I think there are a few part-timers who like doing this because they get to meet new people. I've met a few female product owners from different companies who get to just meet people, get different points of view, get ideas, and so on and so forth, who are captains. I've met founders of some companies who are female founders who've embraced captain because they get to meet people, etc. This is especially in Bangalore, this is a phenomenon that you will see. And I think there are a few people who do who base their livelihoods on the back of
Yeah.
this. And again, female captains, but the number is fairly small, and I think there are a few thought process as to how we want to bring it up and improve and so on. But I think it is genuinely going to take time, simply
Of course.
because of firstly, I think the ridership of just female riders in general is fairly low in India. And I don't think we are definitely at this point proportionate to the overall ridership, etc.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you have this conversation again sometime, maybe we'll see some changes into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to see that because I mean, having the freedom to move around is so big. It's so huge because it just it just opens up opportunities. If you can't travel more than 2 kilometers, I mean, your opportunities are just sort of in that circle, right? If you can move around beyond, which for some reason has been, women in our country have been restricted, the opportunities are restricted. So hopefully, Rapido plays a big role in sort of giving that freedom back to women that they deserve. So that I hope that happens. Coming to the end of the sort of podcast, I want to ask one, of course, data point. I mean, this is something that everyone's talking about, and you know what it's about. It's coming. So sitting at where you are right now, 5 months into this whole COVID thing, from a data standpoint, help me understand what has been of course the impact has been bad, but from a business perspective, what has been the impact of COVID on the business of Rapido, and how has, if at all, and how has it set the course of how you or where you wanted to reach as a company, your vision as a company? How has COVID sort of knocked you off your course, or course corrected you into a different way, if at all it has? So if you could help understand that.
So COVID has played a spoilsport. I think it's almost like there was a bullet train going, and then the bridge is off.
Yeah.
Right. So that has definitely happened, and I think the past few months, especially in the beginning, with the entire country sort of shut down, it was fairly difficult. Like, no rides happening, people are not moving for good reasons, right? And at the same time, I think the good thing that was going on, I mean, just if you think about it from a captain point of view, their earnings are gone.
Of course.
Because the need of movement is gone, the platform is not able to help, etc., right? So from only silver lining there was some demand which was delivery oriented, which helped to an extent, but again, not at the levels at which we were in the past. I think even now we are at a steady pace of recovery, but more and more cities sort of opening up will make that better. So while it is a mobility platform, it's also an earnings platform, right? So I think just from an earnings point of view, it's improving day by day. I think the biggest thing that Corona did was it made a lot of people who depend on the earnings from this slightly unpredictable.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we ran a few initiatives to sort of alleviate that, but you can't replace,
of course,
like massive full-scale operations and earnings from that with whatever initiative you run. So that was definitely a spoil sport. Did not help. Even from our goals point of view, while we were the largest ride-sharing company in India, our goal was to sort of leapfrog from there. I think we were growing fairly well. We had moved into these 80, 90, etc. cities.
Yeah.
I think there were, even in those cities, there were so many opportunities to sort of expand into and solve for. It definitely did play some spoil sport into that. We were looking forward to IPL, serving IPL, which didn't happen. Like a lot of these things that you would have probably taken for granted. And said, okay, this is our growth path and so on and so forth. Definitely did not happen. So I think coming out of that, the hope is we will be able to ride this wave. I think our investors and like the entire board is sort of helping us go through this. And I think there's some bit of planning which helps us to sort of see 2021 properly. Our hope is we will recover as a country. Everyone is safe, and we get a vaccine soon, and things come back to normal, or testing becomes much more cheaper, and things come back to normal, or whatever. The hope is we will come back to track. Like that's the first goal of whatever we were back in March, and then post that continue our journey of whatever we had aspired to before. Right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely played 6 to 8 months of spoil sport, like a 35 grams of disease.
Yeah, of course. So how just to understand, because bike taxi is such a new concept, even though you guys have been around for 4-5 years now, right? I mean, it's still, for some people, it's just like, what the fuck, It's just a very interesting, new, a lot of curiosity. I would say amongst all of the mobility options out there, bike taxi as a concept is the most that has a lot of curiosity around it. There's just, I don't know, there's just something around it that that's weird but also exciting, and it's just that mix of it. So given that's the position that even the concept, I'm sure it has been well established, but not at the extent that Rapido would want in a 4-5 year time span, how has COVID changed that position of bike taxis going forward, if at all it has? So any insight on that? I mean, if the position has changed amongst all the other mobility options out there.
I think a lot of mobility perception has changed. Like people would think twice before taking a bus.
Yeah.
Right. They would at least there'll be some segment which would think twice before taking a cab. I'm sure the same thing happens with bike as well, right? So that safety perception is something that has changed across the board. Having said that, I think India is a country which needs so much mobility, just from a supply point of view, that I think once we come back out of this safe and sound, we will embrace anything that comes at us, right? Cycle, not cycle, motorcycle, cabs, whatever it is, we will embrace, right? I think the reason is because of the desire to move and the way cities have evolved and the way planning happens and so on and so forth, whether it is efficiency or inefficiency. But for both reasons, you will definitely see all modes of transport being embraced again once we are back to normal. I think what we forget is that this is not the first time humankind is going through like a pandemic, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We've had this many times, and the fear and the shall we say the behavior will remain. It'll follow probably a Pareto's law or whatever, where in the near future there will be some fear, and I think over time it'll go away. But it is definitely going to influence perception of what happens to different mobility options. So I think our hope is post a better testing, like test at home or cheaper, $5 test or whatever. Our hope is this becomes much more safer and people will start coming back. Both get back to work, so that way economy improves as well as spending on mobility changes, and so on, right? So I think that is definitely going to be the case. Let's say 6 or 7 months from now.
Yeah.
The bigger threat perhaps is the perception, instead of mobility, the perception of work changing, which is there will be some section of people who will say, look, I just want to stay home and work. And companies will sort of start embracing some of those options. But the reality is that not everyone will be able to, right? So that you can't make biscuits at home.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So if you're, let's say, partly you have to go to work, right?
Yeah.
So I think there will be some sectors where you will see this perception lingering around longer, right? And there'll be some sectors where this will just drop because of the need.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So it's a long-winded answer to a very simple question, but
makes sense.
I would say at least that's what we are thinking, and that's what we're looking forward to.
No, that completely makes sense. I mean, of course, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you guys are seeing and how it's impacting, but the aim is to know. Of course, none of us can predict any of this, but the aim is to make as correct of a guess as possible with all the data available that we have. So just as a last question, I'd like to ask, you've spent 10 months in the mobility industry. I think it's been 10 months if I'm not wrong. I've been stalking on LinkedIn. Sorry. But it's been 10 months. What's been the learning? What's been the one big learning, if you had to sort of what's been the one big takeaway of mobility as an industry and as a sector?
So I think I would relate this to your first question and then sort of full circle. Let's tie this up maybe.
Yeah.
So I think your question of how did you get into mobility? I think there was a hidden intrinsic thing about we should solve the traffic problem, right? And here was an opportunity where we potentially could solve the traffic problem, given you reduce the number of cars coming on the road, etc. So that was like one of the motivations of why it also helped as to why I came in. Now the biggest learning has been that it works. To be honest, I was extremely skeptical, right? Why would I want to go sit behind? I mean, being very honest, I had that conversation with Arvind, where look, you probably have to think about diversifying your offerings, etc. And I think that cultural shift, and I think I went through that journey. Especially having looked at the data, it feels like it works for India, right?
Yeah.
And if more and more people use it, there is a lot more that can be done. Which I think we're just scratching the surface of what is possible with bike taxi right now, right?
Agree.
And I think in general, the way I would look at it is, while we understand how India moves, bike taxi is probably the beginning of a bigger and a better thing that is possible, right? Maybe we might be able to turn around how cities move in the future if we know how people move and what happens, etc. So I think at least the biggest learning for me is it actually works. It might be a boring answer, but it does work.
Makes sense. That's wonderful. Of course, it works definitely, and I think that comes down to frugal innovation. That's something I've been hearing. Which is very just like जो काम करता है बस करता है. It's in India, like that's just how it is. So that kind of innovation is something super exciting to see in India. And when someone gets as big as you guys do, with that simple concept, bike taxi, and of course there's a lot of bunch of things that need to come into place. But if you think about it, bike taxi, I mean, it's not like it was a moment of epiphany of like, wow, but it was always in front of us, and you guys made it happen, and it really works. So that's a great learning in itself. I want to leave the last 1 or 2 minutes, just for you to voice out a message that you might have for either job aspirants, for people, just coming out of college, for just about anyone, that you have a message either from the side of Rapido or personally or from the mobility industry that you'd like to give out. Last 2 minutes, all for yourself.
Ooh. See, I think for aspirants who want to do something with data, I think the only message that I would have is be comfortable with looking at numbers. While there's this machine learning and distributed deep learning, etc. Like there's a lot of buzz going on in this space. But if you're not curious, if you can't ask questions from the data and answer looking at the data, some of those tools and methodologies, etc., is not going to probably help you get better or get value, etc. So I think the biggest advice that I would have is be curious, ask questions from the data and get answers from the data. I think that's your starting point, rather than worrying about which machine learning algorithm should I use. Right. So I think if you know that path, you will be able to get into any problem, situation, etc., and then look at that with a data lens. I think machine learning and other things just come as a end consequence of what you've looked at, rather than the starting point. Right. So that would be for aspirants who want to do something in data. For mobility, like the message that I would have is this may be a specific message, like understanding what you're selling and understanding customer needs is going to be critical to what will happen. I mean, I'm not even talking about bike sharing, bike taxi or whatever else. Even as a city planner, as the BBMP or whoever else, right? If you can't understand your customers, you will end up doing the wrong thing, and it will not solve any problem, right? So being able, like, put efforts in being able to understand what the need is in the city, whether it is exposing data or doing surveys or speaking to people or whatever else be the case. And I think if mobility space does not embrace understanding customers and understanding needs, demand, probably, like, it'll be left behind, right? So I think one of the examples in Bangalore was the MG Road to Indranagar one, where the demand, like the first line that opened, while the survey etc. was valid back probably 20 years ago, the first line that came out had it was a proof of concept, which is great, but probably had less relevance and probably solved fewer customer needs because the city had moved on.
Of course.
Right? So I think that's where if there are efforts put in to sort of understand customer needs constantly, mobility can go places, like,
Of course.
no pun intended.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I love that you ended at that point, because that's something I genuinely believe too. That, I mean, for all this while, this whole transportation thing has been just, the focus on the consumer is probably the last, and now that we're putting the consumer at the center of it and sort of, developing around it is what makes it so exciting, because the needs are so different, as you said, of every city, of every sector in a city. And I think you summed it up really well, so I won't spoil it. Thank you so much, Pramod. I think this was an amazing conversation that I had, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too. And thank you so much for taking your time to do this on a Sunday night.
No problem. I'm glad I did this. I hope this was a fruitful conversation.
Absolutely, it was absolutely fruitful. Thank you so much for everyone who's watching, to everyone who's listening to the podcast. I hope this collaboration has brought us something really cool and really insightful. So yeah, thanks a lot. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Till then, be driven differently.